All right, so something unbelievable happened today in the UK. Even if you're American, pay attention. This concerns you. A few days ago, when they were having the debates on ITV, Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn brought with him documents. They were censored, okay? But they were documents showing that the Tory government had been having talks with Donald Trump about putting the NHS in a free trade agreement, okay? And Boris Johnson, he went on this rant. He got really angry. He was like, no, this is not true. It's a complete lie. We're never selling the NHS. The NHS is not on the table.
You're going to sell our National Health Service out to the United States and Big Pharma.
This is an absolute invention. It is completely untrue. There are no circumstances whatever in which this government or any Conservative government will put the NHS on the table in any trade negotiation. Our NHS will never be for sale.
But today, Jeremy Corbyn pulled out the uncensored version of the documents, okay? So it's about 400 pages. Don't worry, you don't have to read it. But it's about 400 pages of talks between Donald Trump and Boris Johnson about a free trade agreement and what they're going to do with the NHS. This is a bombshell, all right? This is pretty crazy. Let's take a look at what Jeremy Corbyn had to say.
What I have here is something I can reveal to you. "451 pages of unredacted documents and information. All of it here. His government released this. We have since obtained this, which is a very different version of events. These uncensored documents leave Boris Johnson's denials in absolute tatters. Voters need to ask themselves some very serious questions. Is the NHS safe in Boris Johnson's hands? We've now got evidence that under Boris Johnson, the NHS is on the table and will be up for sale. The US is demanding that our NHS is on the table in negotiations for a toxic deal. It's already been talked about in secret. That could lead to runaway privatisation of our health service. Mega corporations see Johnson's alliance with Trump as a chance to make billions from the illness and sickness of people in this country. The US and the UK have already finished initial discussion on lengthening patents for medicines. Longer patents can mean only one thing: more expensive drugs. Lives will be put at risk as a result of this. One of the reasons for US drug prices being on average 250% higher than those here is a patent regime rigged for the big pharmaceutical companies. Dr. Andrew Hill has warned the NHS could have to hand over £500 million a week more for medicines following a toxic Trump deal. This is not only a plot against our NHS, it's a plot against the whole country. These sellout negotiations with Trump cover everything from food safety to gender discrimination rules to workers' rights. How about chlorine-washed chicken on our dinner tables? Have a look at the second meeting on page 42 and 3, where the US even agrees to share its public lines to help our government with its media narratives. So it seems to me that it's now to Boris Johnson to explain how all of this is an absolute invention. You heard his words. This election is now a fight for the survival of our National Health Service as a public service free for all at the point of need. So for the want of any doubt, let me give this reassurance: Labour will never, ever treat our NHS as a bargaining chip in trade talks with anybody. We will never let Donald Trump get his hands on our NHS, because our NHS is not for sale.
So there you go. I mean, these documents are pretty damning. This is a bombshell revelation. I mean, we already knew that they were going to put the NHS on the table. Donald Trump said so himself. And I really doubt that he's going to make a free trade agreement with the UK if it isn't on the table. We all know it's on the table. We know Boris Johnson is. This guy's an opportunist. He doesn't give a crap. What's in these documents is all the talks they've been having since 2017 up until a few months ago. Okay? This is really low. Okay, this is really low what the Tories are trying to do. Basically, putting the NHS on the table, opening it up to Big Pharma to be exploited. And it goes even further than that. And this is all for the sake of having a free trade agreement in a post-Brexit world. It really makes no sense. You know, instead of working out a free trade deal with the EU or just staying in the EU, the Brexiteers go through these mental gymnastics that, oh, no, the UK doesn't need the continent that's like literally next to it, which is its biggest trading partner. No. The UK can trade with the US and with, Australia and things that are thousands of miles away. This is really smart. You know, abandoning your biggest trading partner for no reason whatsoever. And so to compensate for that, they have to make free trade agreements with the US, with whoever else, and they're going to put the NHS on the table. But this is not an option. Healthcare is not a commodity, and they're trying to commodify it like in the US. Okay, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. And there's many ways that they're going to do this. So one way that they're going to do this is with drug prices. Okay, one of the staples of this agreement, what Big Pharma wants is that when they get access to the UK, they want their patents to last longer, just like they do in the US. Why? So the government can't make generic versions of these drugs, and they have more time to cash in on these drugs, to really milk them for all the money that they're worth. That's what they want. They want to monopolize their drugs for way longer than necessary in the UK, so they can keep making money over there in the UK, just like they do in the US. See, they don't care that they're playing with people's lives. They don't care that this affects the health of other people. They don't give a crap. Okay, they want to make money. Just like in the US, just like they're exploiting healthcare in the United States and playing with people's lives, they want to do the same thing in the UK. And that's one of the staples of this free trade agreement. It would allow them to do that. That's why they're pushing for it. What the World Health Organization is saying is that this will cost the NHS £500 million more per week. Why? Because now they have to dish out more money to afford these drugs which have been patented longer. So over time, this is going to cost more money, and it's going to put an enormous financial strain on the government, on public spending, on the NHS. But they don't care because they can make a profit. That's all they care about. And you know, the baseline of this negotiation is that everything is on the table, right? For the US side, for Donald Trump, everything is on the table. And what the UK government has to do is negotiate down from that, right? So they say what's not on the table. They haven't said the NHS is not on the table. 400 pages. Okay? 400 pages. There's not one mention of the NHS not being on the table.
If I can just hold this up again and show you how thick it is. It doesn't take 6 meetings and 540 odd pages to say the NHS is not for sale, right? I think you have to be realistic. That is a very long way of saying no. In fact, it's saying yes, and let's discuss how.
And another way that they can exploit the market in the UK, that they can exploit the NHS, is with dispute settlements. This free trade agreement would allow Big Pharma, these private companies, to come in and sue the UK government. They can sue the UK government for whatever reason. Oh, you didn't buy our drugs. You didn't give us this contract. So it would effectively allow private corporations whose only incentive is to make profit to override public policy, to override healthcare of people in the UK. This is madness. Another way that they exploit the UK and the NHS is this doesn't cover future treatments. Okay, so even if you hashed out what is on the table, what is not on the table, you can have patents for these drugs, you can't for these. When there's medical breakthroughs in the future, when there's new treatments that are being developed, they're up for grabs. They're open season. Okay, they're not going to be protected under this free trade agreement. They're not protected. Okay, Big Pharma immediately could start making profits and exploiting those new treatments and jacking up the prices and limiting treatment because there's no protection under this agreement. So it doesn't have any future proofing. And then, like we mentioned with the patents, okay, their only incentive is to make profit. And with this agreement, they can extend patents for as long as they like, just like in the US, and they can jack up the prices because there's no competition. And it doesn't matter if people die, they don't give a crap. They care about their money. And another really big thing that they want to exploit, they want to get their hands on the data regime of the NHS. The NHS is one of the best healthcare services in the world, okay? They have records going back decades and decades and decades until the 1940s. And these big drug companies, Big Pharma, would love to get their hands on this data so they can make more drugs and patent them and then sell them back to the public. That's all they care about, man. They just care about that data, all right? It's a gold mine for them. This fair trade agreement is a disaster for anyone with a conscience, anyone who actually cares about keeping the NHS safe. And it's not only that, it's that Boris Johnson, the Tories, have been caught lying. We already knew that they were lying. Now we have the proof. It's written there in black and white. That they've been lying, that they said that they were never having negotiations with Donald Trump. They were never talking about the NHS. And now we have proof. We know that they've been lying. I don't know how they got these documents uncensored, because when they requested them with the Freedom of Information Act, they censored 99% of the text. You saw it. It was just black bars everywhere. So I don't know how they got this unredacted version, but that's great. And I really hope it's going to sway people's minds, because I can't believe that anyone would vote Tory after 10 years of austerity almost, and 2 unelected prime ministers, this balls up of a Brexit, which they haven't been able to do for 3 years. Who in their right mind would vote for the Tories? I really don't understand this. And to do what? To give the NHS up to Big Pharma in the United States? This is madness. Like we said, man, Labour are running on a similar platform to Bernie Sanders. Okay, very populist, reinvest in infrastructure, help out working class people, help the poor. The Tories, what are they running on? Get Brexit done, which they haven't been able to get done for 3 years. 2 unelected prime ministers now because they couldn't get it done. And then what? They're going to give up the NHS? They're going to screw over more people, more austerity? Come on, man. This is nonsense. So they've been caught lying today. This is a bombshell. And I really hope it sways voters' minds. They need to know this.